Good. I've been a master gardener for 17 years with Extension. Extension is the arm of Colorado State University out to the counties. We are also the office that has 4-H, food safety and food preservation information and classes, also agriculture, natural resources, community development, and more. So we know that if people know about 4-H, then they can know about the rest of our office that can offer lots of good information. Colorado State is our land grant university that does research in these departments. So we as master gardeners share with our counties research-based information. We are in the middle of our Pikes Peak Regional Gardening Lunch and Learn series. This is April 7th, this is the 6th, tomorrow is the 7th. We're going to be doing a program with Colorado Springs Utilities on watering rules. On the 14th, we're going to be repeating the class from today. And the following week, we'll have a presentation on plants. So if I don't get to all the plants that are on your list when you get your handout today, they will be included in our program on the 21st, as well as information on the 20th about planting a native grass lawn. So we probably will not be able to talk much about that today. By the way, the information was that you can sign up for those classes is epcextension.eventbrite.com. Okay, so what is Waterwise gardening in Colorado? It's really not easy to garden here, as many of you have found out. I don't know how many of you are new to Colorado, but there are some things that make it a little bit difficult. We have low humidity. The temperatures fluctuate, and it depends on which month you're in. You might not know what the season is. We have alkaline soils and a wind. The intense sunlight, while it can be very, very hot, also helps us grow great flowers. And then the growing season is shorter than what most people would like it to be. Our lack of water reminds us that it's a precious commodity and we need to use it wisely. While we have low humidity, that also creates a situation where we really do have less diseases on our plants and less insects. So coming from southern states, you'll find that we don't have nearly as many insects as some of those southern states. Whether or not you know anything about water rights, it goes back hundreds of years. Who owns the water? And if you are curious about it, you could look up something about first in time, first in right, meaning that the person that claimed their right to right to the water are the ones that had first right, and then they could share or sell some of that right to the person downstream. We in Colorado share our water with 6 states: Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California. So we are wanting to use our water in a wise way. We get about 15 to 17 inches of water in Colorado Springs on an average. Depending on where you live, it could be more or less. The average Colorado household uses 50% of its water on its landscape. So
as high as it'll go. Yeah.
That is something we need to be cognizant of. As our population increases, it puts more demand on our water supply, as you can imagine.
I'll lean in.
Priscilla, do you have the ability to mute everyone except me?
That's what I'm trying to do, Joan. Hang on.
Okay, great. So if we can reduce our water use on our landscape by 50 or 60%, that would be a good thing for your budget. So some people live in an area where they can grow plants like these. Of course, this is up in Washington State at the Botanic Gardens. They have so much more rain and so much more humidity that their flowering plants are just amazing. While we can't always have that, we don't need to have this. This is an all rock yard. We don't need an all rock yard. This is not Xeriscape. Some people thought that Xeriscape meant Xeroscape. That's why we're trying not to use that term anymore. But we don't need all cactus, even though that's very beautiful. Those barrel cactus are really, really pretty. So what is Xeriscape? It comes from a Greek word meaning dry. Xeros means dry, and it's pronounced Xeriscape, not Xeroscape. So it means landscaping with water conservation as the primary objective. I also like to think of it as dry scaping, but it does not mean no water. It just means low water. So here is a beautiful landscape. While it says up at the top, a Texas style front yard landscaping, as I looked at it closer, I know this gentleman. And once I saw the gentleman in the picture and I saw the house behind, I realized that this house is in Colorado Springs. It faces, basically faces west, a little bit southwest, but this front yard is definitely west. Gets a ton of sun in the summer, and they've used a rock mulch. I believe that it is drip irrigation. Otherwise, they hand water. I see a hose back here, and it is just gorgeous. This particular garden has been on the Colorado Springs Garden Tour, which is created by Friends of Extension twice in the past 10 years. So that's really nice and honoring that CSU decided to use this picture in their PowerPoint. This landscape is a little bit more modern, but it's definitely a Waterwise landscape. This one is seems to be a little bit more organized with that path and repeating of some of the flowers. This is a very, very beautiful Waterwise garden. And then we have these real full and inviting type landscapes where it's packed tightly with plants. You have some ground cover plants. It looks like you have a water stream coming down here to water those, take the water away from the house. But how beautiful is that? This is more of a sustainable type area where you're maybe trying to catch the water or allow for some of the water to be used in such a way that takes it away from the sidewalk, but it puts it into an area where it can water those plants as well. This one's very inspiring with a lot of grasses. So this is a picture of the demonstration Colorado Springs Utilities demonstration garden on Mesa Road. It's open to the public. You can go in there and see the plants that they're growing. One thing I like about it is that it's been here long enough that you can see mature plants, mature shrubs. I believe that they still identify what they are with little stakes like this one that tells you what the plant is. So you don't have to run into the building and ask them to come out and tell you what the plants are because they have identified them for you. So if you are interested in seeing what plants look like in a landscape, it's off of Mesa Road. And they also have a plant selection key on their website, which I included in your handout. So here are the 7 steps to achieve a water-wise landscape. And I have put the text from these next slides into your handout. So I don't want you to think that you need to be writing these down fast and furious because they're written down for you when you get your handout. So the first thing you want to do is to just plan ahead. Look at the different areas of your yard. Find out if there are slopes. What areas have the most sun? What areas have the most shade? You can actually make it a scaled drawing if you have someone to help you do the measuring. Eventually, before you do planting, I would suggest that you make it a scaled diagram. What about the views? Do you want to see Pikes Peak? Or do you want to plant something that would put a barrier between you and something that you don't want to look at? You can also group your plants with similar water needs, which is important. So this is just an example of how you might start. I also recommend that you plan big and start small. So even if you can't afford to do the whole yard, you might have an idea of what you might do in the future, so you can prepare now for what you would do in the future. For instance, a drip system, or getting irrigation back to a back area where you want to have a vegetable garden. That would be part of your planning. Do you have children and pets that would like to be on some turf? Xeriscape planning does not exclude turf. It's just wise use of turf. Do you want to have an area where you entertain? This is really beautiful. So while they have some hardscape here, they also went ahead and planned for these beautiful plants so they can sit and enjoy them. Do you need walkways? What about a vegetable garden? And what is your budget?
What?
You're on Zoom.
Yes.
That's important to know as well. So the next thing you want to do is determine what your soil is like. So if you are, if you're in the Briargate area, for instance, you probably have a sandy soil. Other places may have a clay-like soil. Depending what you're going to plant, you want to consider whether or not that soil needs to be amended. For instance, if you're going to put in native plants, and we don't have a native list today on this presentation, but you can find a link to native plants from Colorado State University. Those plants do not need an amended soil unless the plant itself says it needs slightly amended soil. Once they get established, they like to have their roots just in the native soils. So you would want to know what you're going to plant. You could get a soil test from Colorado State University to determine the nutrient content. And one thing about getting a soil test is that they're going to ask you what you're going to plant in that soil. So if this gentleman here is rototilling this to have a vegetable garden, then they are going to report back to him what he needs to do with that soil. If he is going to plant natives, then they will report to him on the soil test results what he should do with that soil. I do have this link noted here on your slide. This will be noted on your handout as well. I think this picture in the top right is just an indication that if you need compost, that you can learn to make compost. And we have fact sheets about that as well. Let me mention this and then we'll take questions. You do not have to put in bluegrass, but when you limit a turf area, it allows for other things to be planted. So this picture top left is a flagstone patio, but it has, let's see, this has Turkish Veronica planted in between. This will bloom in early spring and then it'll be green. You can walk on it. And I have a path by my house. I put in Mother of Time, and it's beautiful, and it spreads nicely in between flagstones. So you can find a steppable, is what we call them, these steppable ground covers. Then down here, this is the down on the bottom left corner. This is the Northern Water Conservation Garden demonstration area. So each corner of this patio, this circle here, is planted with different kinds of grasses, and it will tell you each one, in each one, what kind of grass is there and what kind of input it needs as far as water and what maintenance will be like. The picture top right, this grass, when I read the comments from the person who put this PowerPoint together, said that they felt it was buffalo and blue grama, buffalo or blue grama, or buffalo and blue grama mixed together. And that would be not a turf grass, not one that you'd want to play on a lot. So if you have dogs or children, it may not hold up to that, and it can look weedy. So you definitely want to learn more about going with a native grass from an expert, so you don't get into something that you don't like. Okay, let's stop and take some questions.
Joan, at this point, we don't have any questions,
Okay.
but wanted to let everybody know that the link to the Waterwise gardening handout is in the chat room if you want to make sure you are able to download that. And I also put the link to the registration for upcoming classes in the chat room. Now, we did just get a question that came in wanting to know how much watering is needed for the Turkish Veronica ground cover.
Well, so I happen to have this plant, so I can speak to that. My Turkish Veronica does not get watered until, I don't start watering that garden until probably May. So right now it's coming up from the water it got from the snow. After that, I have a drip system there that I don't put a ton of water into this one garden. So it's definitely low water. As far as how much, I would think it would grow nicely from the rain, from any kind of precipitation that you get. I haven't had any trouble with it dying back or turning brown, but it only blooms, it blooms in the spring, and then it's just green for the rest of the time. Anything else?
No, there's no other questions at this point.
Okay, very good. We'll go on.
Thank you.
Yes, there is a question.
Oh, you do have one. Okay.
They had asked, do you think we get enough water that is worth having a rain collection system?
We are going to talk about that as we move on. So I'll wait to answer that one. Okay, so we want to irrigate efficiently. By the way, we are having that native grass class on April 28th. So you can learn all you care to know about using native grasses in your yard on the 28th. So if you are going to water a turf area, you want to use a low volume, low angle sprinkler. This would be the kind of sprinkler that puts the drops of water where you want it to go instead of blowing off in a mist into the air and evaporating. So this would be the kind of sprinkler head you'd want to ask for: low volume, low angle sprinkler. Trees and shrubs, you can use a drip system around those, putting out, each emitter will tell you how much it's going to put out in an hour. And you can put one emitter on each side of each shrub and estimate about how much you're putting out. Adjust your watering times depending on the month. So let's say you begin watering in April or May, you will not water as much as you will in July because it's much hotter in July. You can install a rain shutoff device. I would look through your utilities.
Are you Zooming?
Check with your utilities department to see if they offer any sort of rebates on those. And then also check with your utilities, depending on where you live, on their watering hours. I think ours are between 6 and 6. Is that correct, Priscilla? Do you remember? Anyway, from dusk to dawn, basically, a lot of that is because we have less wind, and it's nice to water your lawn when it's not windy. So to give you an idea, a drip system can put out 1/2 inch to 4 gallons of water per hour, depending on how you have, what kind of head you have on there. Compared to a hose, which would put out 2 to 5 gallons per minute. And it's much easier to measure a dripper based on the emitter than just standing there with a hose, not noting how much you're actually putting out. So consider that when you plan your irrigation system. This is a dry shade area. So even though there are low water plants here, and it probably does not have any sort of drip system, they might need some water in the real hotter times of the season. Beautiful area. Okay, selecting appropriate plants. Links to these 4 websites will be on your handout. Plant Select is a program that was collaborated on between Denver Botanic Gardens, Denver Water, and Colorado State University. So Colorado State University tests different plants in a garden up in Fort Collins. And then they select, I don't know, eight or so plants, sometimes including shrubs and trees, mostly perennials, that they recommend for planting along the Front Range. You can go to that site and search for the kind of plants you're looking for. They'll have a key if you want a ground cover or a certain color, a shrub. Keep in mind that those are tested in Fort Collins. So sometimes those plants are hardy in Fort Collins and semi-hardy in Colorado Springs. So keep an eye on the zone that's recommended. If you are a zone 6A, you might want to plant a 5A just to be careful. My zone is around a 5, and I tend to lean toward the zone 4 plants because I'm thinking they might be a little more hardy in my yard. This link, when you find it on your paper, Waterwise plants, is for Colorado State University, and they have also they also have a plant search on their website. Colorado State University has quite a few fact sheets on different kinds of plants that you might be interested in. And then the Colorado Native Plant Society, this is where you're going to find suggestions for native plants, and that would be native to Colorado. They did a study in Colorado Springs and compared the water use between the traditional kinds of landscapes that people had been putting in and to Xeric landscape, and they had quite a water savings, between 15 and 63% water savings. Now this means that you have to control your irrigation system. You can't put the plants in and then continue to water them full force. They do, though, need to be established, is the word we use. So if you plant Xeric plants or native plants, you'll have to water them on a fairly regular basis for about at least the first year, including the winter if we don't get snow. Because those roots need to find a happy home in the soil before they can really begin to be healthy and hardy. So they don't need a lot of fertilizer. They don't need a lot of inputs to the soil, but they do need that water to get established. Let's see, what else was I going to say about those plants? We'll get back to plants. Using a mulch is also helpful because it keeps the soil cool. It prevents a lot of weed seeds from germinating, because if you have weed seeds drop into this wood mulch, they just do not germinate. You will get some weeds. You might get perennial seeds that were in the soil before you put this in that will come up from the bottom. One thing about rock mulch, there are some plants that prefer to grow in a rock mulch. But it also can be a growing bed for seeds. So if you've planted, let's say, poppies or something in this rock mulch, the poppy seeds that fall will probably grow. But if you keep the weeds out of here, they're not going to be releasing their seeds there. There are different kinds of mulch. Mulch is anything you lay over the top of the soil. Grass clippings can be a mulch, not too thick because they can smell. Straw is good, but it does blow away, so you want to consider that. Wood chips are a good mulch. Then you can have gravel, pine needles, and bark, depending on your situation. You just don't want anything that compacts too tightly, because you do want the water to go through. You can apply mulch just about any time. There's a fact sheet on mulch. We don't recommend you use plastic at all ever under mulch, and landscape fabric sparingly. Eventually you will get weed seeds growing on top of that landscape fabric because of the soil that blows in on it. This is just a demonstration of what not to do. We don't put mulch volcanoes around our trees. All right, any questions at this point?
Okay, can pine needles have too much acid as far as a mulch?
Right, no, they will not. I read a study on pine needles, and first of all, they would have to decompose in the soil over a period of 100 years to actually acidify the soil. And then it probably would not acidify it so much that plants wouldn't grow. What pine needles do, for instance, let's say pine needles drop on the soil, under the tree and around the tree, and the grass stops growing. The assumption is it's because the soil is acidic, but actually what happens is it's a barrier to the water. The water just doesn't go through them. It probably doesn't even get past the tree to get to the ground underneath where the needles are. So in short, the answer is that no, it will not acidify. You can even compost your needles if you are willing to put the work into it, and turn them into compost, but they decompose very slowly if they're not ground up and mixed up and prepared as a compost.
Okay, I have another question. Thank you. Question is, my neighbor's cat has really taken to using my mulch as a litter box. Do you have any suggestions to keep the cat out without hurting them?
I do not. The only thing I did, and I don't, this is not coming from CSU, but I put pine cones where the neighbor cat kept going, and he didn't like stepping on the pine cones, so he didn't come back. But otherwise, I do not know if we have any more information about cats. Unless you tried a spray that you could find at the store. You just have to follow the directions. Yeah, If anyone out there has an answer to that for this question, just type it in the chat, and you might get some more answers that way.
Okay, and are one of the substratas better to use for a dog area versus turf? I'm assuming that's the different type of
Mulch.
mulch or the native grasses.
I don't, from what I know, but I don't know everything about native grasses. I don't think the native grasses are great for animals. And then other than turf, if they're asking about, there are some ground covers that you can grow that are fairly hardy. Anything that was a steppable is what it's called. Steppables means you could walk on them. And then it just depends on if you have a large dog, small dog, if it's a digger. There's one called Pussy Toes that's very low to the ground and it compacts well. That's a ground cover. Am I answering that question?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay.
Another question, is it possible to add xeriscaping around existing rose bushes?
Well, the roses are going to need more water. So whatever you plant there is just going to grow according to the water that you input to the roses. So unless you have some sort of rose that doesn't need a lot of water, you can put xeric plants near anything. But if that rose needs more water, then the rose is going to suffer.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question is, I use pine needles for their acid content under rhododendrons and azaleas. What is your suggestion, given your comment that before about the pine needles not being, putting out a lot of acid? Is there something else they should use for the rhododendrons and azaleas?
Those plants need acid, was it rhododendrons and
Azaleas.
azaleas? And I've never grown those. If they need an acidic soil, you have to add a product that acidifies that soil, but it won't be long lasting. It will be temporary because it's very hard to change an alkaline soil to an acidic soil permanently. So for instance, if you want blue hydrangeas, you're going to be adding a product to the ground or the pot that hydrangea is in to keep it blue. Once the product is not in the soil anymore, if it doesn't stay acidic, it will revert back to its original color, which could be pink or white.
Okay. There are products available in the at places like Lowe's and Home Depots and garden stores that are specific for azaleas and rhododendrons. I used to grow them in Virginia and in Oregon. So there are products out there for that.
Right, and you could also get a soil test.
Yeah.
To see what's really going on in that soil.
Okay, I have another question. Do you have to worry about fungal growth in turf if turf is kept wet too long overnight?
I would say no.
Okay.
No.
And there was I think the rest of these are, I don't see any other questions. I see some comments with regards to dogs and cats. So.
Okay. They can read those and maybe learn something. I don't have a cat. So the maintenance on your Xeriscapes is fairly reasonable for what you're probably already doing. You can prune your deciduous trees in winter, your late blooming shrubs. You want to keep your plants watered in the winter if we don't get snow. Basically, if you don't get an inch of water in a month, which is 10 inches of snow, you need to water. So 10 inches of snow is about what you need to get an inch of water. If it's a wet snow, you might get a little more. If it's a real dry snow, you might get a little bit less. So be prepared to winter water, especially your newly planted trees. In the spring, you aerate your lawns, check your sprinkler systems. All of this is listed on your handout. Remembering how to mow, keep your grass high, let your grass fall. If you let the grass fall all year, if you have a bluegrass, the decomposition of those grass blades will equal 1 fertilization over the year. So you might consider doing that if you don't already. Fall might be a good time to do a soil test if you didn't do one in the spring. Continue to plant for spring, such as bulbs. And it's a good time to, if you don't know how to make leaf mold, it's a compost made with just leaves. You can search for that on the internet. It's not a mold, but they call it leaf mold, and it makes a really great soil amendment. Okay, here we have information about rain barrels. So in 2016, was it? The state of Colorado allowed homeowners to have rain barrels. There is a limit to what you can have. You can have 2 barrels at 55 gallons each. This brings the water from your roof down into a barrel. In Colorado Springs, I figured that 55 gallons of water is worth about 25 cents. So you're not doing it so much to save water as a way to be, what's the word? Just to be doing a good thing for the environment, conservation. So there are specific things they want you to do. They want you to keep mosquitoes out. You're not supposed to use it indoors, not supposed to use the water indoors. It's specifically for outdoors. Definitely no cooking. If that water comes off your roof, birds have been on your roof, so you definitely don't want to use that in any way for any sort of cooking. So you can find lots of information online about rain barrels. Here are 2. This one at the top was probably made specifically for catching rain. The one on the bottom looks like it was a homemade one from a trash barrel. In the winter, you disable those so they don't freeze. And I find I have 2 barrels, plus I've diverted all of my rain gutters, all of my downspouts into a growing area. But the thing is when you catch the water, it has just rained. So you're probably not going to use the water in that barrel right away. But you want to use it soon because it might rain again, and then you want to catch more water. But that is a way of doing active water harvesting. The other way is this passive rainwater collection, which can be called a rain garden. I did put a link on your handout on how to install a rain garden. It's the Colorado State University Stormwater Center. So if you look at the garden on the bottom left, this is a very slow draining rain garden, although it looks like it has just rained. So the rain has come from the house down into this low area. And what that allows, it allows the water to be filtered by the soil, and it goes into the groundwater instead of going out here into the stormwater and sewer system. It directs water from a downspout. Let's say this house has a downspout top left, and maybe it goes into this rocked area and down into a collection. Now I do see that this might go into the stormwater, but they've also added some plants here to be watered from that downspout. I've actually installed one of these and it's not that difficult. So you can find some great photos online if you look for rain gardens. It's not only Colorado that does it, it's states all over the United States. Okay, before we get into the plant selections, I want to check the time. What questions do we have now?
I don't see any new questions at this point.
Okay, so we are going to talk about plants until the time is up. If you have a question, Priscilla, why don't you just interrupt me? Because I'll just keep going
Okay.
until, because I know they want to see these photos. All of these plants I'm going to show you are on your handout. So if you don't have the handout in front of you, you'll be able to be reminded when you see the words on the handout. So first we talk about xeric tree and shrub selections. So they base these trees on their adaptability in Colorado. And you can see a lot of these trees at the Denver Botanic Gardens, or search for pictures, extensionpictures.edu photos. Sometimes site.edu will get you to extension websites. You definitely want to pay attention to the soil situation when you plant your trees and plant them properly.
Joan, before you go on to the next one,
Sure.
the question from earlier that I had stepped away from the computer and missed it is how is Firewise landscaping different from Waterwise?
Okay, we do have Firewise program coming up if you'd like to sign up for that. But Firewise is the where you plant your plants. In other words, it's what the fire department cares about. It's how to position the plants, the mulch, what kind of mulch to use. You're using plants in areas that are going to be less susceptible to fires, and then you don't want what you plant to bring the fire close to your home. Priscilla, have you been involved in that where you live?
Yes, I'm actually in a Firewise area, and we've had the fire department out looking at our community, and they do have some specific plants that they tell you not to plant. And it's not so much that the plants are low water plants. They want to make sure that the plants are not like junipers, because they refer to junipers as fire on a stick. So there is a big difference between the Firewise and the Xeriscape landscaping, because as you indicated, it's you can't have an evergreen or a spruce or something like that within 10 feet of your house, or within 15 feet of your house. You need to make sure that you don't have a deciduous tree within 10 feet of your house. You need to have a 3-foot barrier around your house of rocks, those type of things. So there is a significant difference in the locations and the types of plants.
Very good. Okay, I think that was a good answer. Very good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else at this point?
No, not that I see.
Okay. When you do select trees for your landscape, make sure you understand what their mature size is. It doesn't take too many steps from down your neighborhood street to find trees that were planted too close to the house, too close to the sidewalk. Consider the mature size of your trees and shrubs. Here's a Russian hawthorn, how it looks when it's blooming. And this one is going to be very short. It's going to be a short plant. Deciduous, it will get berries, probably enjoyed by the birds. And it needs a low soil moisture once it is established. it looks like it could take part shade as well. Here's a big tooth maple in the summer and in the fall, if you want fall color. And the bur oaks are also low water. Now, this one is planted in a turf situation, so it's probably getting plenty of water. But it could be also be in an area that it's not in a turf situation. Evergreen trees, your pinyon pines, are low water, and they're not suitable actually for frequently watered lawns. You see them a lot on the plains. Bristlecone pines are a beautiful plant. I wanted to point out that they have these little white flecks on their needles, and that's resin. It's a good way to be able to identify a bristlecone, is because it has these flecks on their needles. And isn't this interesting? Methuselah bristlecone pine, it's the oldest one in the world. Tried to look up where it was. I wasn't successful, but I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to find. Junipers, again, from what Priscilla said, not very close to your house. Some people don't like them at all, but if you're wanting a columnar type shape, this might be perfect for your landscape. We have the 3-leaf sumac in the different seasons, spring, summer, and fall. Pawnee Buttes, sand cherry. It says it's a Colorado native. Most of the time, perennials are only going to bloom for one part of a season. Here's the Pawnee Buttes in the summer and the fall. That could be a beautiful addition to your landscape. Blue Mist Spirea attracts a lot of bees. Here's a plant if you need a privet type plant that you could shape. And the wayfaring tree viburnum has some really nice characteristics to it. Evergreen shrubs, again, there are some juniper species that are more like a ground cover, which could be helpful to you. Mahonia, spring flowers, and then they get this nice fall color with the berries. A desert sweet fern bush. Nice texture on the leaves. Panchito manzanita. The flowers are fairly small, but I'm sure it's very pretty when it's growing. And it points out that it's evergreen, so you would be able to see this green foliage in the winter. Perennials, we've got the penstemons. Keep in mind that some of these are very heavy seeders. In other words, they would seed readily and you would get more. So if you like that, and if they're in a rock mulch, you'll see more plants next season. Salvia or sages, there's quite a few, they come in quite a few colors. It's very easy to find these at the garden centers. We've got the hyssops or agastache. The blue fortune, this one here on the top left is, that one is a heavy cedar. I've had that one before, but not all of the hyssops do reseed. Any questions at this point?
I don't see any new questions. I will let you know that Methuselah is in the White Mountains of Eastern California.
Oh, good. Great. These are ground covers. This is that Turkish Veronica. Here's a lemon thyme back here. The ice plant, this is a very popular plant because it's so beautiful. Ice plant really does like a rock mulch because it doesn't like its neck to be wet in a really wet environment. This yellow one is very, very hardy, and it looks like it's growing possibly in a wood mulch, but they're hybridizing these all the time and coming up with so many different colors. Woolly thyme.
I have a question, Joan.
Sure.
How do you incorporate succulents into into what you've been talking about with the Waterwise plants?
So I do have a few photos of succulents. The succulents in my yard are basically planted in an area where I have rock mulch in addition to large rocks to provide heat. So you might call it a rock garden or a crevice garden, but I don't have any sort of drip system. So that's one way a succulent garden can be low water, is that I only water it when it's really, really hot. Gets plenty of rain, enough water from the rain that the input of water is not that necessary. Two examples here of woolly thyme between pavers and a close-up. See how fuzzy that is? And then this is a Turkish speedwell. I think that previous picture also might have been a speedwell. Now these prairie natives are more or less for the prairie. It was noted that they like to grow where they can ramble and where it's hot. And most of them put out seeds. This wine cups is such a beautiful plant, but keep in mind the rabbits love it as well. Blue flax will send out seeds. Coneflower, Indian blanket, these are all prairie natives. The Mexican hat, you'll find that coming out of your cracks as well because it's a reseeder. But if you like that, it's something you can add. This is the purple prairie clover. And the grasses, we've seen those in the past 10 years, quite a number of them. Little blue stem in the different seasons. Blonde ambition, it's beautiful. It looks just like this. I have these and they reseed, but it's not horrible. You can easily pull out the ones you don't want. Switchgrass is more upright. All kinds of switchgrass. Here's some succulents. They do put out a flower often. The red yucca is beautiful. I'm wondering how many of you might grow agave. I think it's beautiful, but I think that I would probably kill it because I tend to water things that don't need it. And I think that one is really pretty. And then of course, cactus, if you like it. These hens and chicks are fun because you can put them in little crevices. And if you have crevices between your rocks, and they'll grow. Just another photo of a habitat hero in Evergreen, Colorado. Oopsie. Did I end my, oh, I think hang on a second. I think I must have clicked on, there we go. So this is the end of our program. I'm glad that I got through those photos of the picked plants because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do that. But the Master Gardeners do have a help desk. You can send questions. This will be listed on your handout. We currently are working remotely. We plan to open 2 days a week in June if you have to bring in samples. The blog spot, this is written by the Colorado horticulturists. It's like a blog for them to write about their experiences in their gardens. And then we have this website where you can find publications on all kinds of plant related topics. Any other questions?
There was a comment from somebody in Texas, which I didn't realize we had somebody from Texas anyway, saying that most of their agave, yuccas, and century plants died during the the winter, really bad winter storm they had in February.
Oh no! Oh,
yeah,
that's very sad.
And there's a question here: can you address water requirements for commercial properties versus homes? And I don't know if you're able to do that at this point.
No, I don't know requirements for commercial properties. I do not know if Colorado State University addresses commercial properties. We do have a program. So our Master Gardener program, if you go through the class, you apply in the fall and you get interviewed, and you go through the program as an apprentice, and then you have so many hours to give to become a full-fledged Master Gardener. In addition to that, we have something called the Colorado Gardener Certificate. They go through the same classes. They do not incur any volunteer hours, and they get the same information that we give the Master Gardeners. So those Colorado Gardeners are commercial, oftentimes commercial property or commercial landscapers. So whatever a commercial property manager might need to know, information on the Colorado State University website would be just as applicable.
And another question is, it's a comment, basically that they'll be ready to plant after Mother's Day, of course. So thanking you for your information and for the presentation.
Oh, very good.
Yes, as we go forward, the average last freeze date is somewhere around the 15th of May. So Mother's Day is a good cutoff for when we can start planting.
Yes, especially for...
Hey, Joan, I looked out in my yard today and I have a daffodil blooming. So I'm...
Oh, yay, yay. Very good. Those cool weather crops.
Yes.
So if you have a specific question for me, you can go to the Colorado Master Gardener Help Desk, which is our email, csumg2@elpasoco.com. You see that on the screen. You can send them a question for me specifically regarding this program. However, any of the Master Gardeners can answer any questions you have. If you wanted it to come to me specifically, you just tell them that you heard the program by Joan or Joan Nusbaum, and they can forward me that email. Otherwise, the Master Gardeners are willing and ready to help with any kind of questions you have.
And there's no other questions, Joan. So
Hey,
it's 1
very
o'clock.
good.
Very good.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you, Brittany, for doing the interpretation. And I'm going to apply some of what I learned today for my own yard.
Very good. That's what we like to hear. We want to know what you've done and if it worked. And if it didn't, we'll help you figure out why.
Yep. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you have any questions or need me to send you the link to the handout, you can email me at mmitchell@ppld.org.